The thermometer outside the Blackwood Ridge cabin read 20 degrees below zero. It was the kind of cold that didn't just chill, it penetrated, it invaded, it turned breath into ice crystals before the exhale was complete. Inside, Mina Thorne sat by the cast iron stove watching the fire through the grate. She'd been watching fires for 3 years now. 3 years of solitude. 3 years of survival. 3 years of running from a man who worn the title of father but had operated with the heart of a tyrant. The cabin was small, 900 square feet of timber and stone built by some forgotten homesteader in the 1930s. No cell service, no internet. The only connection to civilization was a crackling AM radio that picked up weather reports from Fairbanks 40 miles south. The radio was screaming now. Storm of the decade, the weatherman called it. A polar vortex dropping straight down from the Arctic, bringing winds that could strip flesh from bone, and temperatures that made exposed skin a death sentence in under 5 minutes. Mina pulled her wool cardigan tighter. She'd survived worse than weather. She'd survived her father. Grand Alpha Silas Thorne, leader of the Northern Territories, commander of 12 clans, a man who'd built his reputation on honor and strength, who'd delivered speeches about duty and protection, who'd smiled for photographs with visiting diplomats and signed treaties with a steady hand. That same hand had signed a different kind of document 3 years ago, a marriage contract, her name on one line, Alpha Lucian Draven's name on another. Price negotiated in battalions and territory, 2,000 soldiers in control of the Pacific Coast shipping routes. She'd been 25 years old. Lucien Draven had been 55. His previous 4 wives hadn't survived their marriages. 2 were dead. 2 were in institutions, minds shattered beyond repair. Mina had run the night she'd found the contract in her father's study. She'd taken nothing but the clothes on her back, a trauma medical kit from the clinic where she'd worked, and every dollar she could pull from her accounts before Silas locked them down. 3 years later, she was Ella Vance, a nurse who lived alone and asked no questions and paid for everything in cash. She bought her suppressants from dark web dealers, the kind of pharmaceutical-grade blockers that cost a fortune, and turned her omega scent into something neutral and forgettable. The suppressants were in the bathroom cabinet right now. She checked them obsessively. 12 doses left, enough for 6 weeks if she rationed carefully. Outside, the wind wasn't just blowing, it was screaming. It tore through the spruce trees with a sound like a living thing demanding entry. The windows rattled in their frames. Snow piled against the northern wall in drifts that would reach the roof by morning. Mina checked her watch. 7 in the evening, 14 hours until dawn, 14 hours of storm. She stood walking to the kitchen to pour tea from the pot on the stove. The mug was warm in her hands. Chamomile and honey, a small comfort in a world that offered few. Then she heard it. Scritch, scratch, thud. Mina froze, the mug hovered halfway to her lips. The sound came again, not from the wind, not from branches hitting the cabin. This was deliberate, purposeful, coming from the front door. Scritch, scratch, thud. Then a sound that made her blood stop. A whimper, low and vibrating. The kind of sound that carried desperation in every frequency. Mina set the mug down. She moved to the mantel where the Remington 870 shotgun rested. Her fingers closed around the stock. Cold steel, 12 gauge, loaded with slugs that could drop a charging moose. She'd bought the gun her second week in Alaska. She'd learned to shoot it her third. By the end of the first month, she could hit a target at 50 yards in a crosswind. Mina checked the safety. Off. She pumped the action. The sound was loud in the small space. Mechanical, final. She moved to the door. The peephole was frosted over, useless. She pressed her ear against the heavy oak, listening. Another whimper. Closer now, accompanied by a scratching that sounded like claws on wood. Bears were hibernating. Moose would be bedded down in the storm. Humans would be dead in minutes without shelter and a vehicle. So what was on her porch? Mina's hand went to the deadbolt. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to stay inside, to wait, to let whatever was out there freeze and die and become someone else's problem. But there was another sound now, a rattling breath, a wet cough, the kind of sound a dying thing makes when its lungs are filling with fluid. Nurse instinct overrode survival instinct. Mina threw the deadbolt. She undid the chain. She cracked the door open 2 inches, keeping the shotgun barrel pointed at the gap. The wind hit her like a physical blow. Snow blasted through the opening, stinging her face. The cold was immediate and vicious. She looked down. They were huddled in a pile on her porch. 5 of them. Wolves, but not normal wolves. These were timber wolves of a size that defied biology. The smallest was easily 150 pounds. The largest, a charcoal-colored male with fur that looked like smoke mixed with blood, had to be pushing 250. They weren't attacking. They weren't growling. They were bowing. Every head was lowered. Every body was pressed against the deck boards. They were shivering so violently that Mina could see the tremors even through the thick fur. Ice had formed in jagged crystals on their muzzles. Their eyes were squeezed shut against the cold. Frost covered their paws. One of them, a russet-colored wolf on the edge of the pile, was seizing. His legs kicked out in violent spasms. His head cracked against the boards with a sound that made Mina wince. The charcoal wolf lifted his head. His eyes opened. They were amber, bright and shocking against the dark fur. But they weren't focused. They were glazed. Hypothermia had him in its grip. He looked at Mina. He didn't snarl. He didn't bare teeth. He made a sound that no predator should ever make. A soft chuff, the kind of sound a puppy makes when it's asking its mother for help. Please, Mina didn't hear the word. She felt it. A vibration in her chest, a pull in her gut. Then the scent hit her, even through the freezing wind, even through the suppressants that should have blocked her senses. She smelled it. Ozone, pine, old blood, magic, shifters. Her hands tightened on the shotgun. Every muscle in her body locked up. Shifters meant pack politics. Shifters meant hierarchies and territories and questions she couldn't afford to answer. Close the door. Her survival instinct was screaming now. Close the door and let nature take its course. Shifters are not your problem. Shifters will get you killed. But the russet wolf seized again. His body went rigid. His legs kicked. Foam flecked his muzzle. He was dying, right now, on her porch. Mina Thorne had been a combat medic before she'd become a fugitive. She'd worked emergency rooms in Anchorage. She'd stitched up knife wounds and treated overdoses and held pressure gear on arterial bleeds while waiting for helicopters that sometimes never came. She'd taken an oath once. Do no harm, preserve life. Treat the patient in front of you, not the politics around them. Damn it. Mina slammed the door shut. She undid the chain. She threw the door wide open. Wind and snow blasted into her living room, scattering papers and knocking over a lamp. She screamed over the gale. Get in, move. The charcoal wolf struggled to stand. His back left leg dragged. Useless. He nudged the others with his muzzle. A command. Get up. One by one they crawled over the threshold. It was pathetic. 5 apex predators reduced to shivering beggars dragging themselves across hardwood. The charcoal wolf came last. He pulled himself inside his injured leg, leaving a smear of blood on the floor. The moment his tail cleared the door frame, Mina threw her weight against the wood. The door slammed shut. She locked it, bolted it, put the chain back on. The sudden silence was deafening. Mina turned around. 5 massive wolves were dripping melting snow and blood onto her floor. The smell of wet fur and iron filled the small space. Steam rose from their bodies as the heat of the cabin hit frozen flesh. She backed up toward the kitchen island. The shotgun was still in her hands. She raised it, aimed it at the pile of wolves. Her voice was steady, cold. Listen to me. If any of you shift and try to hurt me, I will empty this magazine into the first one who moves. Do you understand? The charcoal wolf was collapsed near the rug. He looked at her, held her gaze. His amber eyes were dulling as hypothermia dragged him down. But he dipped his chin. Once. A nod. Then he exhaled. A long, rattling breath. His eyes closed. Mina lowered the shotgun. She ran to the linen closet, grabbing every towel and blanket she owned. This wasn't a raid. This wasn't an ambush. This was a medical emergency. She dropped to her knees beside the russet wolf. He was still twitching. His breathing was shallow, rapid. His gums were pale when she peeled back his lip. Stage 2 hypothermia, maybe stage 3. Okay. Her voice was quieter now. talking to herself, talking to the room, talking to whatever God might be listening. Okay, let's not die today. She reached out to check the wolf's pulse. As her fingers brushed the coarse fur, something happened. A spark. Hot and electric. It zapped her skin like static. The wolf's eyes snapped open. It was yellow, feral, focused directly on her. Omega. She didn't hear the word with her ears. She felt it, in her bones, in her blood. A recognition that bypassed language and went straight to instinct. Mina jerked her hand back. No. She whispered it. A prayer, a command, a denial. Don't you dare imprint on me. Stay a dog, just stay a dog. But the heat of the fire was working in now. The cabin was warming. The wolves' bodies were thawing. And with the warmth came the inevitable. Shifters couldn't hold their forms under extreme stress. Cold, that severe injuries, that deep the magic couldn't maintain the animal shape. The air began to shimmer. The charcoal wolf's silhouette blurred. His bones started to crack. Wet, sickening snaps as joints relocated and reformed. Oh God. Mina scrambled backward. Her shoulders hit the kitchen cabinets. The fur receded like water evaporating. The snout shortened. The body elongated. In seconds, the massive beast was gone. Lying on her rug, stark naked and shivering violently, was a man. He was huge, easily 6'4", built like someone who'd spent a lifetime in combat. His body was covered in scars, silvery lines that mapped a history of violence. The worst was on his left thigh, a gunshot wound. Through and through, the cold had cauterized it, but now that he was warming, blood was starting to flow. He had black hair, longer than military regulation, but shorter than civilian carelessness. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, nose that had been broken at least twice. He coughed. Blood spattered his lips. He turned his head, looking at Mina with those same amber eyes. His voice was a ruined rasp. Lock the windows. They're coming. Then he passed out. For 10 seconds, Mina couldn't move. Her brain was trying to reconcile reality with impossibility. 5 wolves, 5 men, all unconscious, all naked, all bleeding on her floor. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, steam rose from 5 bodies as frozen flesh met cabin heat. Somewhere out there, according to the bleeding man, they were coming. Mina's medical training kicked in. Triage, threat assessment, priorities. She ran to the windows first, dropped the heavy blackout curtains, checked every latch. They were solid. The cabin had been built to withstand Alaska winters. The glass was double-paned. The frames were steel reinforced. She grabbed the heavy armchair from beside the fireplace and wedged it under the front door handle. Extra security. Then she turned to the bodies. They were all in bad shape, but the dark-haired man was critical. The gunshot wound in his thigh was the immediate problem. The cold had kept him from bleeding out, but core temperature was rising. The blood was flowing now. Not arterial, not yet. But it would be if she didn't act fast. Mina grabbed her trauma kit from under the kitchen sink. It was military grade. Scalpels, sutures, morphine, broad-spectrum antibiotics, hemostatic gauze. She'd stocked it when she'd first moved to the cabin. Living alone in the wilderness meant being your own emergency room. She knelt beside him. He was even bigger up close. Shoulders that could carry a full pack for days. Arms that showed the kind of muscle you didn't get from a gym. This was functional strength, the kind built through repetition and necessity. More scars, a puckered circle on his right shoulder. Another bullet, a long slash across his ribs. Knife, burns on his left forearm. She didn't want to think about what had caused those. Mina pressed a thick gauze pad into the hole in his leg. He groaned. His body arched off the floor. Teeth gritted. Stay down. Her voice engaged that particular tone she'd learned in the ER. The one that expected obedience and didn't tolerate argument. You've lost a liter of blood, maybe more. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, struggling. The others, focus on breathing. She didn't look up. She was injecting lidocaine around the wound. Local anesthetic. She didn't have time for him to be thrashing. I'll get to them. She worked fast, cleaned the wound with antiseptic that would make anyone else scream. He just grunted. The bullet had gone clean through. Entry wound in the front of the thigh, exit wound in the back. No bone damage that she could see. No arterial involvement. He'd been lucky. She stitched it closed. 16 sutures in the entry wound, 12 in the exit. Her hands were steady, practiced. She'd done this hundreds of times. Flesh was flesh. Human or shifter, the anatomy was the same. As she worked, the others began to shift. The russet wolf became a young man, early 20s, curly brown hair, a face that looked too innocent for the world he clearly inhabited. He was curled in a fetal position, shivering so hard his teeth were chattering audibly. Hypothermia, stage 2, maybe stage 3. The massive black wolf became a giant. Tattoos covered his neck and arms. Prison ink by the look of it. He sat up slowly, blinking hard. His eyes swept the room. Even dazed, he moved between Mina and the others. Protective, easy. Mina tied off the last suture. She still didn't look up. I'm the one with the needle. You're the one with frostbitten toes. The giant looked at her, then looked at the dark-haired man. His voice was like gravel in a cement mixer. Kale, he's alive. Mina stood up. She wiped blood on her jeans. Barely. She pointed at the pile of blankets. There are quilts. Cover up. I need to check the rest of you for frostbite and wounds. A blond man was sitting against the wall now. Sharp features, angular face, ice blue eyes that were studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He didn't look disoriented like the others. He looked calculating. Who are you? His voice was smooth, cultured, and completely devoid of gratitude. The woman who saved your ass. Mina's tone was flat. She moved toward him. Lift your feet. I need to see the soles. He hesitated. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he obeyed. His feet were waxy white. Classic frostbite. Rewarming is going to hurt like hell. She grabbed another blanket, started wrapping his feet. Don't scream. I don't know who's chasing you, but I assume they have ears. The fifth man groaned. He rolled onto his back. Sandy hair, a face that even half dead managed to project charm. He opened his eyes, looked at Mina. If this is heaven, his voice was a rasp. The angel is prettier than I expected. Bit bossy, though. Mina ignored him. She tossed a blanket in his direction. Cover yourself. You're bleeding from a slash on your ribs. For the next hour, the cabin was controlled chaos. Mina moved from patient to patient. The young one with hypothermia got warm saline or 4 fluids. She found a vein in his arm, set up a drip, wrapped him in thermal blankets. His core temperature was 89 degrees. Critical but survivable. The sandy-haired charmer had a shallow knife wound across his ribs. It looked worse than it was. She cleaned it, glued it shut with medical adhesive. The giant had frost-nipped ears. They'd recover, but they'd hurt for weeks. She slathered them with antibiotic ointment. The blonde had the worst frostbite, 2nd degree on 3 toes. She packed his feet in lukewarm water, slowly raising the temperature. He didn't make a sound, but his jaw was clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack. KL, the dark-haired one, he'd passed out again. The blood loss had him. She checked his vitals every 10 minutes. Pulse was weak but steady. Breathing was shallow. He needed a hospital, but the nearest one was 40 miles away in a blizzard that had buried the roads under 6 feet of snow. So he'd have to settle for a combat medic and a cabin. By the time she'd done everything she could, exhaustion was setting in. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis was fading. Her hands were shaking slightly. Delayed stress response. The 5 men were scattered around her living room now. The young one was asleep under a pile of blankets near the fire. The giant was guarding the door even in his weakened state. The sandy-haired one was dozing on the couch. The blonde was sitting against the wall watching her. Kale was on the rug unconscious, his breathing finally evening out. Mina retreated to the kitchen. She needed distance, needed to think. 5 shifter males, in her cabin, during a blizzard, with someone hunting them. This was the exact situation she'd spent 3 years avoiding. She washed her hands in the sink, scrubbed the blood from under her fingernails. The water ran pink, then clear. Behind her, someone moved. She turned. Kale was awake. He'd managed to pull on a pair of sweatpants she'd found. They were too short for him. Old ones from a boyfriend she'd had before everything went to hell, before her father had sold her like livestock. Kyle limped to the edge of the kitchen. His voice was stronger now, deeper. We owe you. You don't owe me anything. Mina kept scrubbing her hands even though they were clean. You just need to heal and leave. We can't. Not yet. Why? She spun around. Who's chasing you? Hunter's Kale exchanged a look with the blonde man, a conversation happening without words. Not Hunter's. Kale's voice went dark. The Vanguard. Mina dropped the scrub brush. It clattered into the sink. The Vanguard were the Royal Guard, the elite police force of the Shifter Council. If the Vanguard was hunting them, these men weren't just rogues. They were high-value targets. What did you do? Her voice came out as a whisper. She was backing up. Her spine hit the refrigerator. The blonde spoke from his position by the wall. His voice was bitter. We didn't do anything. We are the Vanguard, or we were. The sandy-haired one on the couch raised his mug of water in a mock toast. High Commander Cale Blackwood and his lieutenants. Accused of treason? Accused of murdering Grand Alpha Silas Thorne. The floor dropped out from under Mina's world. Silas Thorne, her father. She was staring at the men accused of killing her father. Cale was studying her now. His eyes narrowed. He took a step closer, his nostrils flaring. You smell familiar. Have we met? The heat of the cabin was making her suppressants fail. 3 years of carefully maintained chemical neutrality was breaking down under stress, in proximity to 5 powerful males. Her real scent was bleeding through. Vanilla, rain, something sweet and distinctly omega. No, the lie came out too fast, too sharp. I'm just a nurse. My name is Ella. Cale stared at her. The silence stretched out. Agonizing, she could see him processing, analyzing. His eyes were amber fire now, focused, intense. You're lying. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. His voice dropped into something deeper, something that bypassed conscious thought and went straight to instinct. Alpha command. Every cell in Mina's body wanted to submit, to bare her throat, to tell him everything. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. The pain helped, gave her something to focus on besides the overwhelming urge to obey. The giant was standing now. He'd moved to block the door without her noticing. The sandy-haired one was sitting up, no longer relaxed. The blonde was on his feet. Even the young one had woken, his eyes wide and alert. They'd formed a perimeter. She was surrounded. Cale took another step forward. His limp didn't slow him down. Why does an Omega living alone in the middle of nowhere smell like royal court? 'Cause Mana forced the words out. I ran away from one of them. It was a half-truth, the best kind of lie, close enough to reality that it carried the ring of honesty. Cale studied her, his head tilted. The intensity didn't fade, but the aggression dialed back a fraction. He winced, his hand going to his thigh. The stitches were pulling. He was still weak from blood loss. We need safe harbor. His voice was quieter now. 3 days, until the storm breaks and we can contact our allies. If you throw us out, we die. If you help us, I swear on my wolf, no harm will come to you. Mina looked at them. 5 men, battered, desperate, falsely accused if she believed them. And dangerous, so dangerous. If she kicked them out, they died. If she let them stay, she was harboring fugitives who might recognize her at any moment. She looked at the young one. Wyatt, she'd heard the giant call him. He was watching her with eyes that held too much pain for someone barely out of his teens. 3 days, her voice was hard. But you sleep on the floor, and if you touch me without permission, I put the next bullet in your chest, not your leg. The sandy-haired one smirked. Feisty. I like her. Shut up, Rowan. Cale and the blonde said it in perfect unison. Night fell like a guillotine. The storm outside intensified. The wind didn't just blow, it attacked. It threw itself against the cabin with enough force to make the timber frame shudder. Inside, the only light came from the wood stove and a single kerosene lamp on the kitchen counter. Mina sat in the armchair with the shotgun across her lap. She hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Not with 5 strange men in her home. They were sprawled across the living room floor on makeshift beds of blankets and couch cushions. The giant was near the door, a human barricade. The blonde was propped against the wall, somehow sleeping, sitting up with a knife resting on his knee. Cale was restless, tossing, turning. His body was fighting to repair the muscle tissue in his thigh. Accelerated shifter healing, but it still hurt. She could see it in the tension of his jaw. Then Wyatt started whimpering. It began as small sounds, high-pitched, distressed. His legs twitched under the quilt. No, he was mumbling, still asleep. Please don't make me. Tears leaked from his closed eyes. Mina hesitated. She should stay back. They were dangerous. They were fugitives. They were the men accused of killing her father. But the nurse in her was louder than the survivor. She set the shotgun down carefully, quietly. She crept across the floorboards, avoiding the spots that creaked. She knelt beside Wyatt. Hey, her voice was soft. She reached out, shaking his shoulder gently. Wake up. It's a dream. Wyatt gasped. His eyes flew open, wild, dilated, unfocused. Before Mina could pull back, he moved, not to attack, to hold. His arms wrapped around her waist. He buried his face in her stomach. His whole body was trembling. They're burning it. He sobbed, half awake, caught between nightmare and reality. They're burning the den. The pack, I can smell it. The scent coming off him was overwhelming. Burnt sugar, ash, pure distress. Mina did what her mother had done for her a lifetime ago before the darkness had taken over their lives. She ran her fingers through his curly hair, scratched gently at the base of his skull where neck met spine. Shh, her voice was instinctive, soothing. You're safe, you're in the cabin, the fire is just the stove. Wyatt's breathing hitched. He inhaled deeply, pulling her scent into his lungs. You smell like peace, he whispered it like a confession. Get off her. The voice was low, dangerous. K.O. was awake. He was propped up on one elbow, his amber eyes glowing in the semi-darkness. Not quite human, not quite wolf. Wyatt flinched. He scrambled back, his face flushing red even in the dim light. Alpha, I didn't mean to. I was dreaming about the night he couldn't finish. Go back to sleep, Kale's tone left no room for argument. It was pure command. Then his gaze shifted to Mina. And you, stop touching my beta. If you bond with him, you complicate everything. Mina bristled. She stood up, smoothing her sweater. I was waking him from a nightmare. I'm not trying to bond with anyone, especially not a pack of fugitives. Good, K.O. grunted. He shifted his leg, wincing at the pull of stitches. Because once this storm clears, we're gone. And you'll forget we ever existed, trust me. Mina retreated to her chair. She picked up the shotgun, checked the safety even though she knew it was on. I'm looking forward to it. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Because Wyatt's nightmare had shown her something. These men were running from more than just accusations. They were running from something that had burned. Something that had destroyed. And whoever had framed them for Silas Thorne's murder wasn't going to stop until every witness was dead. The next morning brought deceptive calm. The wind had died to a whisper. Snow blanketed everything in silence. The cabin was buried under 5 feet of fresh powder. The windows were covered halfway up. The door wouldn't open without serious effort. They were trapped. Together. Mina was in the kitchen making oatmeal. It was the only thing she had enough of to feed 6 people. The pot was enormous, bubbling on the stovetop. Rowan slid onto one of the bar stools. He looked significantly better. Color had returned to his face. He moved with a fluid grace that reminded her he was a predator, no matter how charming his smile. So, he flashed that smile now, equal parts dangerous and disarming. Coffee. Or do we have to beg for that too? Pots on the stove. Mina didn't turn around. Help yourself. You're very hospitable for a woman who held a shotgun on us all night. Rowan poured himself a mug. He took a sip and hummed. Better than the mud we drank in the barracks. Tell me, Ella. He said the name like he didn't quite believe it. Why is a pretty thing like you hiding out here, broken heart? Or running from the law like us? Mina gripped the wooden spoon tighter. I like the quiet. Bullshit. The voice was cold, precise. The blonde. Soren. He walked into the kitchen fully dressed in his dried clothes. Somehow he looked crisp, sharp, like he'd just stepped out of a tactical briefing instead of a near-death experience. Nobody lives 40 miles off-grid for the quiet. Soren's ice-blue eyes pinned her in place. You have high-grade medical supplies, military-grade locks on the doors. And he moved closer, close enough that she could feel his body heat. You're on high-dose suppressants, illegal ones. I can smell the chemical signature under your natural scent. Mina spun around. She pointed the wooden spoon at him like a weapon. My medical history is none of your business. It is when my alpha is sleeping on your floor. Soren's voice was clinical, detached. Suppressants that strong are used for two things: trafficking victims hiding from their buyers, or high-born omegas hiding from their arranged mates. Which one are you? Mina's heart hammered against her ribs. Soren was too smart. He was pulling her apart layer by layer, too fast. Before she could answer, a low growl vibrated through the cabin. Garrett, the giant. He was at the window. He wasn't looking at them. He was staring at the tree line. Movement. His voice was a rumble. Not natural. Moving against the wind. The mood shattered instantly. Kale was up. His limp was still pronounced, but he moved to the window beside Garrett with the speed of someone used to combat. What is it, shadows? Garrett's voice was flat. 3, maybe 4. Not animals. Mina ran to the peephole in the door. She pressed her eye against it. At first she saw nothing but white. Then she saw it. A distortion in the landscape. A flicker of black that seemed to dissolve into smoke and reform closer to the cabin. Shadow stalkers. Kale's voice was a curse. The vanguard sent the witchborn. Mina's blood went cold. Shadow stalkers were constructs. Dark magic given semi-solid form. They were used for one purpose: hunting. And they didn't stop until their target was dead or they were destroyed. They found us. Rowan was on his feet now. His playfulness was gone. How many? 4. Garrett was counting, circling the cabin, testing the perimeter. We can't shift. Kale's jaw was clenched. We're too weak. The cold took too much out of us. If we shift now, we won't have the energy to fight. They'll tear through us. We need silver or fire. Soren was already scanning the room, cataloging weapons. What do you have? I have road flares. Mina was moving before she finished speaking. In the emergency kit. And rock salt loads for the shotgun. Get them. Kale's voice was pure command now. All trace of the injured man was gone. This was the high commander. This was the soldier. Garrett reinforced the windows. Soren tracked their pattern. Find the weak point. Rowan weapons check. Wyatt, sir. Wyatt's voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. You're our ace. If they breach you, drop the ceiling on them. Understood? Understood. Mina yanked open the orange emergency box mounted by the door. 3 road flares, a box of waterproof matches, a thermal blanket, a first aid kit she'd already depleted. She tossed a flare to Rowan. Crack. The kitchen window exploded inward. Glass flew everywhere. A massive shadow claw, translucent and smoky but solid enough to shatter reinforced glass, swiped through the opening. The creature tried to squeeze through the frame. It looked like a wolf made of nightmares. Smoke and shadow given teeth and claws. Its eyes burned with green witch fire. The temperature in the cabin dropped 10 degrees instantly. Garrett roared. He threw his shoulder against the creature, shoving it back. But the shadow burned where it touched his skin. He screamed. The smell of seared flesh filled the air. The flares, Kale bellowed. Now! Rowan cracked the cap, struck the flare. It hissed to life with blinding red light. Magnesium fire. He jammed it directly into the stalker's face. The creature shrieked. It wasn't a sound. It was the sensation of sound, like tearing metal and breaking glass and screaming, all compressed into one impossible frequency. The shadow dissolved where the red light touched it. The thing recoiled, pulling back through the window. The door. Wyatt was pointing, its bowing inward. The heavy oak was flexing. Something massive was ramming it from the outside. Again. The wood was thick. It would hold. For now. Mina grabbed her shotgun. She didn't hesitate. She pumped the action, aimed at the center of the door where the impacts were focused. Squeezed the trigger. Boom! The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The slug punched through the oak. On the other side, something shrieked. Different from the first stalker. Higher pitched. Again. Kale was beside her now. His hand steadied her arm. Fire again. She pumped, aimed, fired. Boom! They're circling. Soren was at the other window. They're not attacking all at once. They're testing us, looking for the weak point. They're hurting us, Kale realized at the same moment Mina did. If we go outside, the cold kills us. If we stay here, they pick us off room by room until they find an opening. Kale looked at Mina. For the first time, he didn't look at her like a stranger or a threat. He looked at her like a teammate. Does this cabin have a cellar? Yes. Mina's ears were ringing from the shotgun blast. Root cellar, under the pantry. There's a hatch, Wyatt. Cale's orders came rapid fire. Get the hatch open. Soren Garrett, grab supplies. Food, water, medical kit, ammunition. Rowan, your rear guard. We go to ground. We can't hide in a hole. Rowan argued even as he moved to obey. We're not hiding. Cale's eyes flashed gold. We're bottlenecking them. If they want us, they have to come down a ladder one at a time, and we'll butcher them as they fall. The cellar was stone and earth, old, built when the cabin was first constructed. It smelled of potatoes and mildew and cold dirt. The ceiling was barely 6 feet high. Kyle had to duck. They huddled there in the darkness. The only light came from Mina's emergency lantern. 6 people crammed into a space meant for food storage. Above them, the stalkers prowled. They could hear it, the scrape of claws on wood, the crash of furniture being overturned. The creatures were tearing the cabin apart, looking for prey. Hours passed. Mina treated Garrett's burns with the last of her antibiotic ointment. The shadow burn had gone deep. The flesh was black and weeping. He didn't complain, just gritted his teeth and let her work. Kale sat with his back against the stone wall. His leg was bleeding again. The stitches had torn during the fight. Mina packed the wound with gauze and wrapped it tight. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. Thank you. His voice was low, meant only for her, for everything. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. But the fact that you stayed, that you fought with us instead of hiding. Kale's amber eyes held hers. That means something. Above them, a different sound. Shrieking. Not attack, retreat. The stalkers were pulling back. Sunlight, Wyatt whispered. It's dawn. Shadow stalkers couldn't survive direct sunlight. It burned them worse than any flare, dissolved them back into the void they had been summoned from. They waited another hour, making sure. When Garrett finally pushed the hatch open, they emerged into devastation. The cabin was destroyed. The sofa was gutted, stuffing scattered everywhere. The kitchen cabinets were ripped off the hinges. The curtains were shredded. Every window was broken. Snow had blown in through the caps, covering everything in a layer of white. Mina stood in the center of her living room, her sanctuary, the safe place she'd built over 3 years. Gone. We have to move. Carol was leaning heavily on the kitchen counter. His leg had started bleeding again. They know we're here. The witch who summoned them knows her pets failed. She'll send a strike team next. Humans with guns. We can't fight that. We can't move. Mina turned on him. Her voice was sharp. You'll tear that artery if you try to walk through deep snow. You'll bleed out before we get half a mile. We don't have a choice. Soren was already moving toward the bedroom. The only room the stalkers hadn't fully destroyed because the door had been closed. I need to salvage what I can. Maps, compass, any intel on don't. Mina moved to block him. Too quick. Don't go in there. Soren paused, his hand on the doorknob. He looked back at her. The suspicion was back, sharper than before. Why? What are you hiding in the bedroom? Ella, it's private. She stepped between him and the door. I've saved your lives twice. Give me some privacy. I don't believe in privacy. Soren's voice was cold. I believe in intelligence, in knowing exactly who we're trusting our lives to. He shoved past her. He was stronger, faster. Mina grabbed his arm, but it was like trying to stop a tree from falling. Soren threw the door open. The bedroom was simple. A bed, a dresser, a bookshelf. He began searching, methodical, efficient. He pulled out drawers, dumped clothes on the floor. Stop it. Mina was trying to pull him back. Get out. This is... He found it on the bottom shelf of the bookcase, hidden behind medical textbooks and survival guides. A leather-bound photo album, old, expensive, the kind embossed with family crests. No. Mina lunged for it, but Garrett was there. He caught her around the waist, held her back effortlessly. Soren opened the album. A photograph fell out. Formal portrait, professional, the kind taken for official council documents. A man with silver-streaked hair, military uniform, medals on his chest. He was standing proud. One hand rested on the shoulder of a teenage girl. She had dark hair, wide eyes. She looked terrified even in the formal pose. The room went absolutely silent. Soren turned slowly. He held up the photo so Kale could see. Do you recognize him? Alpha Kale's face went white, then red, then a dark, violent shade of purple. A growl started deep in his chest. It built, grew, became something primal that vibrated the floorboards. Silas. The name came out like a curse. Grand Alpha Silas Thorne. He looked at the girl in the photo, studied her. Then his eyes shifted to Mina. Everything clicked into place. The suppressants, the hiding, the familiarity of her scent. You. Kyle crossed the room, the air around him heated, temperature rising with his rage. You're not just an Omega. You're her, the runaway princess, Mina Thorne. Garrett released her like she'd burned him. The 5 men formed a semicircle, blocking the exits. The dynamic had shifted in a heartbeat. She wasn't their savior anymore. She was the daughter of the man who destroyed their lives. He died 3 weeks ago. Rowan's voice had lost every trace of humor, every bit of the charm that usually colored his words. We were framed for it, but you disappeared 3 years ago. Everyone thought you were dead. The entire Northern Territory mourned the Grand Alpha's missing daughter. I wish I was dead. The words came out bitter, sharp. Mina backed up until her legs hit the bed. She looked at KL, at the rage burning in his amber eyes. Go ahead, kill me, finish what you started. You killed him, didn't you? You got your revenge. KL crossed the room in 2 strides. His hands gripped her shoulders, slammed her back against the wall. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. He was terrifyingly close, his scent overwhelming, smoke and pine and pure alpha dominance. We didn't kill him. KL's voice was a roar that rattled the windows. We were his vanguard. We swore to protect him with our lives. We were loyal until the moment we walked into his office and found his throat ripped out and the red witches planting evidence on us. Mina stared at him, stunned. What? We didn't kill him. Wyatt's voice cracked from the doorway. Tears were streaming down his face. We loved him. He was like a father to us. He pulled me out of the gutters when I was 15, gave me purpose, gave me a pack. We would have died for him. Mina laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound that didn't belong in her throat. Loved him. Then you didn't know him. You didn't know him at all. KL's grip loosened slightly. Confusion warred with anger in his expression. What are you talking about? Mina looked up at him. Then her gaze traveled to each of them. Garrett, Soren, Rowan, Wyatt. 5 men who dedicated their lives to a lie. Silas Thorne wasn't a hero. Her voice was steady now, cold. She'd spent 3 years running from this truth. 3 years pretending it didn't exist. He was a monster. He sold me. 3 years ago, he signed a contract to mate me to the Alpha of the Southern Coalition. A man 3 times my age. A man known for breaking his Omegas. That's why I ran. That's why I'm here. I didn't run to hide from the world. I ran to hide from him. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. You're lying, Soren said it, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Mina reached under the mattress. Her fingers closed around the file folder she'd hidden there 3 years ago. The one piece of evidence she'd stolen before she'd fled. She threw it at KL's chest. Read it. The marriage contract, signed by Silas Thorne, witnessed by 3 council members, priced at 2 battalions of soldiers and access to the southern ports. He sold me for an army. Kyle opened the folder. His hands were shaking slightly. He scanned the document. His knuckles turned white. He recognized the signature. He recognized the seal. He'd seen both 1,000 times on orders and commendations in official proclamations. The anger drained out of him, replaced by something hollow, something broken. He looked at Mina, really looked at her, saw the fear he'd mistaken for guilt, saw the scars he'd missed, not physical ones. The kind that lived in the eyes. He sold you. KL's voice was barely a whisper, and now he's dead. Mina's voice trembled despite her best efforts. And if you say you didn't do it, then whoever did is running the council now. And if they find me, they'll finish the sale. Soren finished the thought. His tactical mind was already 3 steps ahead. The Southern Alpha still wants his prize. The new regime will hand you over to solidify the alliance. Political marriage. Strategic asset. You're worth more alive than dead. Kyle released Mina. He stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. When he looked at his men, something passed between them. A silent communication. Pack understanding. He turned back to Mina. His voice found its command again. We can't stay here. The strike team is coming. If they find you, they take you. If they find us, they kill us. So leave. Mina wiped her eyes, angry at herself for the tears. Get out of my house. No. Kale's voice was firm, final. He looked at Garrett, at Wyatt, at Soren and Rowan. They nodded, one by one. Agreement without words. We don't leave women behind. Kyle turned back to Mina. Not to men like that. You saved our lives, Mina. Now we save yours. I don't need saving. The words were automatic. Defensive. You have a choice, Kale extended his hand. Stay here and wait for the witches to drag you south. Or come with us. We're going to clear our names. We're going to take back the council. And we're going to burn the contract your father signed. Mina looked at his hand, large, scarred, dangerous. For 3 years, she'd survived alone. For 3 years, she'd trusted no one. For 3 years, safety had meant isolation. But for the first time in all those years, someone was offering her something other than captivity. They were offering her a fight. Outside, the wind had picked up again. But underneath it, faint and distant, came another sound. Mechanical, rhythmic, snowmobile engines. Multiple of them. The strike team. Mina looked at the 5 wolves standing in her destroyed cabin, ready to do it for a man who'd betrayed them, ready to die for her. She took Kale's hand. We take the truck. Her voice was steady. It's in the barn. It has snow tires and chains, and I'm driving. I know these roads. Kale grinned. It was feral, terrifying. Perfect. Let's go hunting. The barn doors exploded outward, not from the wind, from the grill of a 1998 Ford F-150. Mina had the pedal floored before the engine fully turned over. The truck fishtailed in the deep snow tires spinning before the chains bit down. Hold on, she screamed it over the roar of the engine. In the truck bed, Garrett and Kale were already returning fire. 4 men on high-powered snowmobiles swarmed the property. White tactical gear, automatic weapons. They weren't shifters. They were human mercenaries. Paid hunters. Bullets pinged off the tailgate. One punched through the rear window. Safety glass spiderwebbed but held. Go left, Soren shouted from the passenger seat. His eyes were locked on the side mirror. They're trying to flank us. Mina yanked the wheel. The truck drifted sideways. For a moment, she thought they'd roll. Then the chains caught, and they launched forward onto the logging road. A snowmobile roared up alongside the driver's window. The rider raised a submachine gun. Mina could see his finger tightening on the trigger. The back window of the cab slid open. Wyatt leaned through his eyes, glowing amber. He didn't use a weapon, he just roared. The sound was amplified by the confined space. But it was more than sound, a telekinetic blast, small, focused, invisible. The snowmobile skidded sideways like it had hit a wall. It struck a tree stump. The rider went airborne, disappearing into a snowbank in a spray of white. Nice shot, kid, Rowan yelled from the back seat. He was squeezed between Wyatt and a pile of duffel bags they'd grabbed from the cabin. Keep your eyes on the road, Ella. Don't tell me how to drive on my mountain. Mina's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, but her voice was steady. They tore down the winding pass. It was suicide speeds for these conditions. 40 miles an hour on ice-covered switchbacks where 30 was pushing it. But Mina knew every pothole, every dip, every place where the road narrowed or the shoulder dropped away into nothing. Behind them, the remaining snowmobiles fell back. They couldn't match the truck's brute force on the straightaways. By the time Mina hit the main highway, the sun was fully up, blinding bright off the snow. The silence returned. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and the wind whistling through the bullet hole in the rear window. Mina didn't slow down until they were 50 miles south. She pulled into the parking lot of a grim-looking roadside motel. The sign read The Pines in flickering neon. Half the letters were dead. Why are we stopping? Kale banged on the roof from the truck bed. His voice was sharp. We need distance. Mina put the truck in park. Killed the engine. She slumped over the wheel. The adrenaline was crashing now. Her hands were shaking. Because we need gas. We need to ditch this truck because they have the plates, and I need a minute. Kale hopped down from the bed. His limp was pronounced. The fighting had torn his stitches worse. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandages and his pants. He opened the driver's door. You did good. It was the first genuine compliment he'd given her. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Mina looked at him, up close in the harsh daylight, and he looked exhausted. The stubble on his jaw was thick. Pain had etched deep lines around his eyes. We're not safe yet. We're alive. That's more than we had this morning. We need a room. Soren was checking the perimeter, making sure they hadn't been followed. We need to clean up and plan our next move. If the Southern Alpha is involved, we can't just run. We're being hunted by two armies now. The Council and the South. They rented a single room, cash only, no questions asked. That kind of motel. It smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner that couldn't quite cover the underlying scent of decades of transient desperation. 2 double beds for 6 people. The dynamic in the small room was suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of 5 agitated alpha blood males and 1 distressed omega. Mina went into the bathroom. She stared at herself in the cracked mirror. She looked wild. Her hair was a tangled mess. Her eyes were dark-circled with fatigue. There was blood on her sweater. Not hers. Kale's probably. Or Garrett's. When she came out, the men had established a hierarchy without discussion. Garrett was guarding the door. Soren was spreading a map out on one bed. Wyatt was sitting on the floor field stripping and cleaning the guns they'd salvaged. Rowan was pacing like a caged animal. Kale was sitting on the edge of the other bed trying to redress his leg wound. His hands were clumsy with exhaustion. Let me. Mina grabbed her medical bag, the one thing she'd made sure to bring from the cabin. She knelt between his legs. The position was intimate, immediate, electric. As she cut away the dirty gauze, Kale's hand gripped her shoulder to brace himself. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin of her neck. A jolt went through her. Not fear, not entirely, something deeper, something that bypassed thought and went straight to instinct. Need. Her suppressants were gone. Left behind in the destroyed cabin. The stress, the adrenaline, the proximity to 5 powerful males. Her biology was jump-starting systems she'd kept dormant for 3 years. Kale stiffened. He smelled it, a sweet, cloying scent cutting through the suppressant residue. Vanilla and honey, the first hint of preheat. Mina, his voice dropped an octave, became something rough and dangerous. Step back, I have to stitch this. Her hands were trembling as she threaded the needle. You tore half of them out. You're going into preheat. Kale's grip on her shoulder tightened. You need to step away from us. We're on edge. We're dangerous right now. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Rowan was suddenly there, standing behind her. The playful mask had slipped. What was underneath was dark, hungry, predatory. Do you have any idea what it feels like for us, 5 unclaimed males in a room with an omega who smells like salvation? Back off, Rowan. Kale's voice was a whip crack. We're all thinking it, Kale, Rowan challenged. His voice was low, intense. Why fight it? The bond helps us, makes the pack stronger. If we claim her, she is not a resource. Kale stood up, ignored the pain in his leg. He shoved Rowan back hard enough to make him stumble. She is a person, and she is under my protection. Nobody touches her unless she asks for it. Is that clear? The command rolled off him like a physical wave. Alpha voice. The thing that bypassed conscious thought and grabbed the hindbrain. Rowan's head dropped. He bared his neck in submission. Clear Alpha. Mina stared at Kale. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He was fighting his own instincts just as hard as he was fighting Rowan's. Thank you. The words came out barely above a whisper. Kale turned to Hayer. His eyes were burning gold. Not quite human anymore. Don't thank me. Just go sit with Wyatt. He's the safest. The youngest. His instincts aren't as developed. If you stay near me right now, I can't promise I'll be a gentleman. Mina retreated to the corner where Wyatt was sitting. The young wolf looked up at her with something like adoration in his eyes. He scooted over without being asked, making space on the floor. I won't hurt you. Wyatt's voice was soft. I swear it. I'll bite anyone who tries. For the first time in 3 years, Mina felt something she thought was lost forever. The fragile beginning of belonging. By nightfall, Soren had a plan. He stood by the map pointing to a circle he'd drawn in red marker. We need leverage. His voice was clinical, detached. We know the witches framed us. We know the Southern Alpha bought the contract for Mina. But we don't know who the middleman is. Who on the council facilitated the coup? The broker, Garrett grunted from his position by the door. Mina looked up from where she'd been rebandaging her hands. They were raw from gripping the steering wheel. Who Marcus Ashford? Cale leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He runs the underground shifter network in Fairbanks. Information. Safe passage. Black market goods. If something moved in Alaska, if someone got paid to look the other way, Marcus knows about it. He's a snake, Rowan muttered. Would sell his own mother for the right price. He owes me. KL's voice went hard. Border Wars, 2009. I pulled him out of a collapsed bunker in the disputed territories. Blood debt, he honors those. It's a trap. Mina said it instantly. If he sells information, he's already sold yours. We don't have a choice. KL pulled on a heavy jacket, one they'd stolen from a gas station along with the baseball cap he wore now to hide his distinctive features. We're out of ammo, out of money, running on fumes. We need to know who's pulling the strings. Mina stood up. Then I'm coming with you. No, Cale's voice was flat. Absolute. If things go south, you need a medic. Mina grabbed her bag. And frankly, Wyatt is the best defensive asset you have with that telekinesis. You need all hands. Cale looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't, not with logic that sound. He nodded once. Stay behind Garrett. Do not engage. They left the motel at midnight, stole a van from the parking lot. Soren had it hot-wired in under 30 seconds. The meeting point was an abandoned cannery on the edge of the Tanana River. The building was a rust bucket. Corrugated metal walls streaked with orange decay, broken windows like missing teeth. It smelled of old fish and diesel fuel and decades of industrial rot. Cale ordered Wyatt and Mina to stay in the van. No. Mina opened the door. If things go south, you need backup. We're coming. Cale looked at her. Something passed between them. Understanding. Trust. He nodded. Stay behind Garrett. Do not engage unless I give the word. They walked into the cannery. The vast space was full of shadows, rusting conveyor belts, ancient processing equipment. In the center, sitting on a crate under a single swinging bulb, was a man in a tailored suit. Marcus Ashford was 60 if he was a day. Silver hair slicked back, a thin face with sharp features. He held a silver flask, taking a sip as they approached. Cale Blackwood. Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The most wanted man in the Northern Hemisphere. You look terrible, my friend. Cut the crap, Marcus. Cale stopped 10 feet away. The rest of the pack fanned out, tactical positions without discussion. Who killed Silas? Who let the Southern Alpha in? Marcus sighed, took another sip from his flask. Straight to business. No small talk. No. How have you been, Marcus? Shame. The name. Cale's voice dropped into a growl. It's complicated. Marcus set the flask down. The coup wasn't just about power, Cale. It was about biology. The bloodlines are weakening, inbreeding, genetic bottlenecks. We needed fresh genetics. Strong omega lines to revitalize the packs. The Southern Alpha promised vitality. You mean he promised breeding stock? Mina stepped forward. Her voice rang clear in the empty warehouse. He promised to enslave omegas. Marcus looked at her. His eyes widened slightly. Well, well, the runaway bride. You're even prettier than the wanted posters. Worth every penny of that bounty. You're disgusting. I'm a businessman. Marcus shrugged. He pulled out a pocket watch, checked it. And unfortunately for you, business is booming. Click. High-intensity floodlights slammed on from the catwalks above. Blinding white. Mina threw up a hand to shield her eyes. Ambush, Soren yelled. Dozens of red laser sights dotted their chests. Men in black tactical gear rappelled from the rafters on fast ropes. But these weren't Vanguard. They wore a different crest. A rising sun over mountains. Southern Coalition. I'm sorry, Cale. Marcus was backing into the shadows. But the bounty on your heads is 10 million. And the bounty on hers, he looked at Mina. Priceless. A voice boomed from the catwalk above, amplified by a speaker system. Kill them all, but keep the girl alive. I want her intact. Circle formation, Kale roared. The 5 wolves moved instantly. Muscle memory, training. They surrounded Mina facing outward. A living shield. Gunfire erupted. The cannery became a war zone. But the vanguard were elite soldiers. Even in human form, even weakened by cold and injury, they were faster and stronger than the mercenaries. Garrett flipped a heavy metal table. It crashed down, creating a shield. Bullets sparked off the steel surface. Rowan returned fire with a pistol he'd taken from one of the snowmobile riders. His shots were precise, controlled. 3 rounds, 3 bodies dropping from the rafters. Wyatt screamed, not in fear, in effort. He threw his hands out. A stack of heavy fish crates lifted into the air. 30 feet, 40. Then dropped like bombs onto a cluster of attackers below. The crash was tremendous. 3 men disappeared under a ton of wood and rusted metal. But there were too many. For every one they dropped, 2 more appeared. We can't hold this. Soren was reloading, making every shot count. We need an exit, the floor, Kale shouted over the gunfire. Wyatt, blow the floor. The cannery was built on stilts, pilings driven into the riverbank. The floor was old wood, rotting, compromised by decades of moisture and neglect. Wyatt's eyes squeezed shut. Blood started pouring from his nose. The strain of using his ability was enormous. He focused everything he had on the rotting floorboards beneath him. Crack. The sound was like lightning striking wood. A jagged split appeared. Widened. The floor sagged. Again. Kale grabbed Mina, pulling her close. Wyatt now. Wyatt screamed. His whole body convulsed with effort. Crack. The floor gave way. Mina felt a drop in her stomach. The sensation of falling. She screamed as they plunged into darkness. She hit frozen river ice with bone-jarring impact. The air exploded from her lungs. She slid across the slick surface, crashed into a snowbank under the pilings. Debris rained down. Wood, metal, bodies, some screaming, some silent. Sound off. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Sound off now. Garrett, here. The giant's voice was strained. Ribs might be cracked. Soren. Clear. I'm mobile. Rowan. The charmer sounded breathless. Concussion, maybe, but functional. Wyatt. A weak cough. I'm okay, I think. Silence. Mina. Kale's panic was palpable in that single word. Mina. She tried to speak. Couldn't. The impact had knocked the wind out of her. She dragged in a breath, then another. Finally managed to gasp out words. I'm here. She pulled herself out of the snowdrift. Blood was running from her nose. Probably okay. We have to move, Soren hissed. They're coming down. They scrambled through the pilings, used the darkness and the maze of support beams to hide. Made it to the riverbank breathless and battered. The van is compromised, Kale said. We're on foot. Look. Rowan pointed toward the road. A limousine was parked there. White, pristine, surrounded by armed guards in Southern Coalition colors. A man stepped out. He was tall, white blonde hair, a cruel, handsome face that looked like it had been carved from marble. He wore a coat made of white wolf fur, real fur, taken from kills. Alpha Lucian Draven, the man Silas Thorne had sold Mina to. He was holding a radio. His voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Kale Blackwood, I know you're down there. You fight well. I'll give you that. But look at your team. They're bleeding. They're tired. They're broken. And you, he laughed, sagged. You can't win this. Lucian snapped his fingers. 2 guards dragged a figure out of the trunk of the limo. An older woman, bruised, beaten, but alive. Mina's hand flew to her mouth. Ilara, her nanny. The woman who'd raised her after her mother died. The only person who'd loved her unconditionally before Silas had destroyed everything. I have the girl's nursemaid. Lucian's voice was almost cheerful. I'm going to count to 10. If Mina doesn't walk out here and surrender, I will snap this old woman's neck. 1. He's bluffing, Soren whispered. He's not. Mina's voice was dead, flat. Lucien enjoys pain. He'll do it. 2. We can take him, Garrett growled, though he was favoring his left arm. No, you can't, Mina said. Tears were streaming down her face. He has 30 men. You have handguns and injuries. You'll all die. 3. We die fighting. KL grabbed Mina's arm. We don't trade lives. 4. Mina looked at KL. The bond between them was humming now. Frantic, desperate. She realized in that moment that she loved him. Not because of biology, not because of heat or scent or instinct, but because he was honorable. Because he fought for what was right, even when it cost him everything. Because he was everything her father wasn't, and that was why she couldn't let him die. I have a plan, she whispered it. Her hand was already moving to her medical bag. Finding the syringe she kept for emergencies. Heavy sedative, the kind she used for field surgery. 5. Mina reached up. She kissed Kael. It was desperate, salty with tears, tasted like blood and snow and goodbye. Kael froze, stunned by the contact. I'm sorry, Mina whispered against his lips. Before he could react, she jammed the syringe into his neck. Depressed the plunger. Full dose, Kael's eyes widened. Me, he crumpled. Garrett caught him before he hit the ground. 6, what did you do? Rowan yelled, horrified. He wouldn't let me go, Mina sobbed. She was backing away. Up the snowy bank, take him. Get him to safety. Regroup. 7, Mina, don't, Wyatt begged. He reached for her, save him. Mina's voice cracked. She used every ounce of authority she had, the authority of a Grand Alpha's daughter. That's a direct order. Go. 8, she turned and ran up the bank, her hands raised above her head. Stop, she screamed it. I'm here, let her go. 9. From the shadows of the riverbank, 4 conscious wolves watched in helpless rage, their alpha unconscious in Garina's arms, their omega walking toward captivity. Lucian Draven smiled. It was the smile of a predator who just won. He shoved Alara into the snow, grabbed Mina by the hair. Smart girl. He threw her into the back of the limousine. The car sped away, taillights disappearing into the darkness, leaving the vanguard broken, scattered, and alone. But as the limo vanished over the ridge, Wyatt noticed something, a faint electronic beep, coming from where Mina had been standing. He dug in the snow, found a small GPS tracker, still warm from being carried in her pocket. She planted it. Wyatt's voice was filled with awe. Before she surrendered, she left us a trail. In the distance, Kael started to wake. The sedative wasn't as strong as Mina had hoped, or maybe his shifter metabolism was burning through it faster than human normal. His first word was her name, a roar of grief and rage that echoed across the frozen river. His second word was an order. Find her. Kael woke violent. The sedative wore off, leaving behind a splitting headache and a rage so pure it felt like fire in his veins. He was back in the motel room. Someone had dragged him there, dressed his wounds, put him in the bed like he was something fragile. He wasn't fragile. He was furious. Where is she? His voice was hoarse, raw. He tried to sit up. The room spun. Garrett's massive hand pressed him back down. Easy, Alpha. You're still metabolizing the drugs. Where is she? Gone. Soren's voice was clinical from his position by the window. Southern Coalition took her 48 hours ago. We've been tracking the GPS signal she planted. It leads to Iron Mountain Fortress, Tennessee-Georgia border. KL closed his eyes. The bond in his chest was pulling, screaming. Every instinct demanded he shift and run south until he found her or died trying. But he was high commander of the vanguard. He'd been trained to think tactically, to plan, to win. He opened his eyes. Get me the satellite phone. Rowan handed it over. The phone was old, encrypted, connected to networks the council didn't monitor. Kale started dialing, numbers he hadn't called in years, names from a life before everything went to hell. Blood debts, that's what he was calling in. Every favor owed, every life saved, every mission completed. 10 years of bleeding for the Northern Territories. It was time to collect. First call Alpha Natasha Volkov of the Siberian clan. They'd fought together in the border wars. She owed him 3 lives. Second call Alpha Marcus Kane of the Coastal Pack. Kale had saved his son from a witch ambush. That was worth an army. Third call Alpha Devon Cross, no relation to the Southern Draven line despite the name. He hated Lucian with a passion that went back generations. Enemy of my enemy. By dawn, Kale had commitments. 12 northern clans, 800 warriors, more than an army. This was a fucking crusade. But before he mobilized, something happened that changed everything. The motel room radio crackled to life. Not the AM station they'd been half listening to. This was a different frequency, one that shouldn't have been accessible on civilian equipment. Static. Then a voice, female. Tired but steady, don't rush in. Kale was across the room in a heartbeat. He grabbed the radio. Mina. The transmission was weak, breaking up, but it was definitely her. 47 hostages. I've mapped the fortress, guard rotations attached. The radio went silent for a moment, then a data burst. Digital information compressed and transmitted in seconds. Soren's laptop pinged. He opened the file. Holy shit. Soren's voice was awed. It's everything. Floor plans, guard schedules, armory location, weak points in the perimeter. She's been running recon. How Wyatt was staring at the radio. She's supposed to be a prisoner. Kyle felt something in his chest, not just the bond, something bigger. Pride. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's running an operation from inside. The radio crackled again. Mina's voice was fainter now. Battery dying. Wedding is in 48 hours. East Tunnel. I'll unlock it. Wait for my signal. Then silence. Kyle looked at his pack, at the men who'd followed him through hell and would follow him through worse, at the laptop screen showing Mina's intelligence work, at the phone that had promises from 12 clans. Get the van. His voice was pure command. We have a wedding to crash. Iron Mountain Fortress was not a metaphor. It was a literal mountain, granite and iron ore. The Southern Coalition had built their stronghold into the rock itself. 300 years of construction, walls 20 feet thick, only 2 ways in. The main gate steel reinforced and guarded by 50 soldiers, or the smuggler's tunnel on the east face, known only to a few. Mina had found it on her 3rd night of exploration. She'd picked the lock on her tower room using the forceps from the small medical kit they'd missed when they'd searched her. Medical tools made excellent lockpicks if you knew what you were doing. 3 nights of careful reconnaissance, moving through the fortress like a ghost, memorizing guard rotations, counting ammunition stores, finding the cells in the sub-basement where 47 Omegas were imprisoned. They ranged in age from 16 to 35. All of them had contracts. All of them had been sold by fathers or alphas or councils. All of them were part of Lucien's breeding program. On the 2nd night, Mina met Ivy Ashford, 19 years old, Marcus Ashford's daughter, the leverage that had forced the broker to betray KO. My father didn't want to, Ivy whispered through the bars. Her face was bruised. Her wrists were raw from shackles. They took me 6 months ago, said if he didn't cooperate, they'd kill me. Worse than kill me. I know. Mina was working on the lock. She'd stolen a set of keys from a drunk guard, but they didn't fit all the cells. I'm going to get you out. How Ivy's voice was hollow. There's 200 soldiers here. I'm working on it. Mina got the lock open. She handed Ivy a scalpel from her kit. Hide this. When I give the signal, you cut through anyone between you and the East Tunnel. Understand? Ivy's fingers closed around the small blade. Her eyes hardened. Understood. The 4th night, Mina stole a radio from the communications room. She transmitted the intelligence to Kyle, felt the relief when he responded. He was alive. He was coming. But she couldn't wait for rescue. She had to create the opening. The wedding day arrived with brutal efficiency. Mina stood in the tower room staring at the dress they'd brought her. White silk, elaborate beadwork. It probably cost more than most people made in a year. It felt like a shroud. She put it on. Not because she'd given up, because she needed them to think she had. She concealed the scalpel she'd kept in the hem, hid the stolen radio in the elaborate updo they forced her hair into. The battery was nearly dead. 1 transmission, maybe 2. That's all she'd get. Guards escorted her to the Great Hall. The room was massive. Vaulted ceilings. Stone walls hung with tapestries depicting Southern Coalition victories. 100 witnesses, alphas from allied packs, council members who'd sided with the coup, merchants who'd profited from the breeding contracts. At the altar, Lucian Draven waited. He was smiling, that cruel, cold smile that never reached his eyes. He wore white to match her dress. His coat was that same wolf fur. She could smell the death on it. Beside the altar stood Counselor Isolde Vaughn, silver hair, elegant features, the woman who'd orchestrated Silas's murder and taken control of the council. She would perform the ceremony, bind Mina to Lucien with words and magic and law. Mina walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. Silas was 3 weeks dead. Even if he'd been alive, she wouldn't have accepted his hand. She reached the altar. Lucien took her hand. His grip was bruising, possessive. "You look beautiful." His voice was soft, meant only for her. "Don't worry, I'll break you gently. The first few months are always the hardest." Mina said nothing, just smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes either. The ceremony began. Isolde spoke in the old language, binding words, pack law. Mina only half listened. She was counting, timing. The guards rotated every 20 minutes. She'd timed them for 3 nights. In 7 minutes, the east tunnel would have its lightest coverage, 2 guards instead of 6. That's when Kael needed to hit. The vows reached the critical moment. Lucien spoke his acceptance, bound himself to her with words of ownership. My Omega, my mate, my property. Then it was Mina's turn. She opened her mouth. But instead of vows, she spoke into the hidden radio. Now her lips barely moved. East Tunnel. It's unlocked. Lucien didn't hear. He thought she was crying. He smiled wider. But 300 miles north, Kael heard, and the Northern Army moved. The Great Hall had excellent acoustics. That's why Mina heard it before anyone else. A low rumble, like distant thunder. But it wasn't thunder. It was an army. The floor shook, just slightly, enough to rattle the chalices on the ceremonial table. Isolde paused mid-blessing, frowned. Then the doors at the back of the hall exploded inward. Not opened, exploded. The heavy oak torn off its hinges by a telekinetic blast that left Wyatt's nose bleeding even at this distance. 800 wolves poured into the great hall, but leading them was Kael Blackwood. He wasn't shifted. He was walking in human form, wearing tactical gear, carrying a sword taken from the old Vanguard armory. His amber eyes blazed with gold fire. Behind him the pack, Garrett massive and terrifying, Soren moving with that surgical precision, Rowan twin pistols already firing, Wyatt blood streaming from his nose lifting guards into the air with his mind and slamming them into walls. And behind them the northern clans, 12 alphas, 800 warriors. They'd come for justice. They'd come for vengeance. They'd come for Mina. Kill them all. Lucien roared. He was shifting even as he spoke. His form blurred, bones cracked. In seconds the man was gone, and a massive white wolf stood in his place. He didn't attack the army. He went for Mina. But Mina wasn't the frightened girl anymore. She grabbed the iron candelabra from the altar. 20 pounds of wrought metal. She swung it with everything she had. The impact caught Lucien across the snout. The wolf yelped, staggered back, stunned. That 1 second of distraction was all Kael needed. He vaulted over the ceremonial table, shifted midair. The charcoal wolf slammed into the white wolf with the force of a truck. They went down in a tangle of fur and fangs. The great hall erupted into chaos. Mina didn't wait to watch. She ran to the side passage, the one that led to the sub-basement, to the cells. She'd memorized the route. Guards tried to stop her. She was ready. The scalpel came out. She'd trained as a combat medic. She knew exactly where to cut. Femoral artery, carotid, brachial. She moved through them like surgical precision given violent form. She reached the cells. Ivy was already there, having somehow picked her own lock. Together they opened the others. 47 Omegas flooding into the corridor. This way. Mina led them toward the east tunnel, the one Kael's forces had breached. Freedom was 50 yards of stone corridor away. But Isolde Vaughn appeared at the tunnel mouth. She wasn't alone. 6 red witches in crimson robes, their hands already glowing with dark magic. You stupid girl, Isolde's voice echoed in the stone space. Did you think we wouldn't account for this? Did you think we'd let you just walk away? Mina stepped in front of the Omegas, shielding them with her body. You killed my father to start a breeding program. You were going to enslave hundreds. For what genetic diversity? That's eugenics. That's monstrous. That's survival. Isolde's eyes were cold. Our bloodlines are dying. In 3 generations, there won't be enough shifters left to maintain pack structure. We needed strong Omega genetics. Your father refused, so we removed him, and framed the Vanguard because they were loyal to him. Mina's voice was steady. Because they would have stopped you. Precisely. Isolde raised her hand. The witches raised theirs. Red light began to coalesce. Binding magic. Lethal magic. I'm sorry, child, but you've seen too much. You know too much. You all have. The magic launched. 6 bolts of crimson energy. Mina closed her eyes. This was how it ended. At least she'd given the others a chance. But the magic never hit. A wall of stone erupted from the floor, 20 feet high, 10 feet thick. The red bolts splashed against it like water against a dam. Wyatt stood at the entrance to the tunnel. Blood was pouring from his nose, his eyes, his ears. Using that much power was killing him. But he held the wall. Run. His voice was a whisper, but it carried. Run now. Mina grabbed Ivy. They ran. All 47 Omegas flooded into the tunnel. Behind them, the stone wall collapsed. Wyatt collapsed with it. But Garrett was there. The giant caught the boy, threw him over his shoulder, ran. The tunnel was chaos, northern forces fighting southern guards. But the North was winning. They had numbers. They had rage. They had purpose. Mina emerged into daylight. The sun was setting, painting the sky red and gold. She'd been underground so long, she'd forgotten what sunset looked like. Cahill. She had to find Cahill. She ran back toward the Great Hall, pushed through the fighting. She was covered in blood. Some hers, most not. She didn't care. The Great Hall was a war zone, but the fighting had moved, concentrated now on the raised platform where the ceremony had been interrupted. Cahill and Lucien were still fighting, both in wolf form, both bleeding. Cahill's injured leg was slowing him. Lucien was targeting it. Dirty fighter, going for the weakness. Lucien lunged, jaws aimed for Cahill's throat. A killing blow. Mina didn't think. She grabbed a fallen sword, threw it. Her aim was terrible. The blade tumbled end over end. But it was enough. The sword hit Lucien's flank. Not deep, not lethal, but it distracted him, made him turn, made him expose his throat. Cahill's jaws closed around white fur, around flesh, around the life that had caused so much suffering. But Cahill didn't kill, not yet. He forced Lucien to shift back, pinned him in human form, throat in his jaws, one bite away from death. Soren appeared with a camera, military grade, already broadcasting, streaming to every pack in North America. Cahill shifted back, kept his hand on Lucien's throat, pressed down just enough to make breathing difficult. Confess. Cahill's voice was cold. Tell them about the breeding program, about killing Silas, about the coup. Confess, or I let you bleed out slowly. Lucien's eyes were wild, panicked. He looked at Isolde. She was in custody now, held by Natasha Volkov's warriors. No help coming, it was Isolde. Lucien gasped. His voice transmitted to thousands of viewers. Counselor Isolde Vaughn. She orchestrated everything. Silas refused the breeding program. Refused to sell Omegas for genetic material. So she hired red witches to kill him. Framed the Vanguard. Made me the offer. Unlimited Omegas in exchange for military support. The camera kept rolling. Lucien kept talking. Named names. Gave dates. Described the program. 200 Omegas. Breeding contracts spanning a decade. All designed to create a new generation of shifters with diverse genetics. When he finished, Cahill looked directly into the camera. Justice is public. Tyranny dies in sunlight. Then he crushed Lucien's throat. The death was broadcast live, witnessed by every pack, every clan, every shifter with access to a screen. In the council chambers in Montana, Natasha Volkov's strike team arrested Isolde Vaughn. The evidence had already been transmitted. Confessions, financial records, testimonies from freed Omegas. 3 other council members were arrested within the hour. All complicit, all guilty. The coup fell apart in a single day. 7 days later, the Grand Tribunal convened. The council chamber in Montana was packed. All 15 Clan Alphas present, plus representatives from every major pack, plus the 47 freed Omegas who'd survived Iron Mountain, plus Alara Hayes recovered and healing. Mina stood at the center, not as a victim, as a prosecutor. She'd spent the week preparing, gathering evidence, coordinating testimonies. She wasn't just a runaway anymore. She was the architect of justice. Isolde Vaughn was brought in chains. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her silver hair was tangled. Her elegant composure shattered. The charges were read: murder, conspiracy, human trafficking, attempted genocide of Omega bloodlines through forced breeding. Mina presented the evidence. She didn't need notes. She'd lived this nightmare. She spoke for 3 hours, detailed every crime, every contract, every life destroyed. Then she did something unexpected. She called Ivy Ashford to testify. Called Marcus Ashford, the broker who'd betrayed Kyle. Marcus spoke about being coerced, about his daughter's kidnapping, about the impossible choice between loyalty and family. When he finished, Mina spoke again. Her voice was clear, steady. Silas Thorne was my father. He was Grand Alpha. He was also a tyrant who sold me like livestock. Lucien Draven was an alpha. He was also a slaver who imprisoned 47 women. Isolde Vaughn was a counselor. She was also a murderer who orchestrated a coup. Mina paused. Let the words sink in. This system enabled them. It allowed them to treat Omegas as property, as bargaining chips, as resources to be exploited. We don't just punish individuals. We dismantle the system that created them. She pulled out a document, pages and pages she'd written in the week since Iron Mountain. Legislation, law, reform, the Omega Protection Act. Her voice rang through the chamber. Forced marriage contracts are illegal. Trafficking is punishable by death. 5 Omega representatives will be added to the council. This will never happen again. The vote was unanimous. Isolde Vaughn was sentenced to life imprisonment. The 3 complicit council members received the same. Marcus Ashford was pardoned for his coerced cooperation, and then they offered Mina a council seat. She refused. I'm not a politician. Her voice was firm. I'm a medic. I serve where I'm needed most, not in chambers, in the field. Instead, she announced the establishment of the Blackwood Sanctuary Network. Medical clinics, safe houses, support systems for Omegas escaping dangerous situations, funded by seized assets from the breeding program. The council approved it with applause. 6 months later, Blackwood Ridge was unrecognizable. The cabin had been rebuilt, expanded. It was now the central hub of the sanctuary network. Medical clinic, training facility, safe house, home. Mina ran the operation with the same precision she'd used to plan the Iron Mountain rescue. 200 patients a month, 15 Omega medics in training, a network that spanned 12 states and was growing. Of the 47 freed Omegas, 30 had chosen to stay, to work, to heal, to build something new. 17 had returned to families. All of them kept in touch. Alara lived in a cottage on the property. She helped with administration, with counseling, with making the scared ones feel safe. The Vanguard had reformed, not as council enforcers, as something better. Kyle was guardian commander. He toured the northern territories, made sure the new laws were enforced, made sure Omegas had protection. He answered to the council, but he answered to Mina first. Garrett ran security for the sanctuary network, trained the staff, made sure no one got through who shouldn't. Soren directed intelligence. He'd dismantled 8 trafficking rings in 6 months, freed 32 Omegas, put 17 slavers in the ground. Rowan led border patrol, scouted for threats, intercepted runners, brought them to safety instead of sending them back. Wyatt became an advocate. He used his voice, his story, his power. He spoke at pack gatherings, at council sessions, at schools, teaching the next generation that Omegas weren't property. They were people. It was winter again when the knock came. Mina was in the clinic, late night. Most of the staff had gone home. She was reviewing patient files when she heard it. Soft, hesitant, desperate. She opened the door. A girl stood there. 19, maybe 20, shivering in clothes too thin for the cold. Her eyes were wide, terrified. Please, the girl's voice cracked. They're hunting me. I ran, but they found me. I don't know where else to go. Mina didn't hesitate, didn't question, Didn't ask for identification or explanation. Get inside. Her voice was firm, kind. You're safe now. She pulled the girl across the threshold, wrapped her in a thermal blanket, led her to the medical bay. What's your name? Mina was already checking vitals. Hypothermia, early stages, bruising on the wrists, signs of restraint. Ava, the girl whispered it. Ava, I'm Mina. You're at Blackwood Sanctuary. No one will hurt you here. I promise. Behind her, the door opened. Kale walked in. He'd been on patrol, checking the perimeter. He saw Mina with the girl, understood immediately. I'll do a security sweep. His voice was low. Make sure she wasn't followed. Mina nodded, grateful, trusting. Kale left. The door closed. It was just Mina and Ava in the quiet medical bay. The heater hummed. The lights were soft, safe. I ran too once. Mina said it gently as she cleaned the girl's wounds. 3 years ago, I was terrified. Alone, but I survived. And I'm not running anymore. Ava looked at her. Really looked. Saw the scars, the strength, the absolute certainty. Neither will you. Mina finished bandaging Ava's wrists. You're going to heal. You're going to train. And when you're ready, you're going to help the next girl who comes through that door. Because that's what we do here. We survive. We heal. We fight back. Ava nodded, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of despair. They were relief, hope, the first breath after drowning. Later that night, Mina stood on the porch. The winter wind was howling. The same wind that had brought 5 dying wolves to her door months ago. The same cold that had tried to kill them all. But inside, the fire was burning. The lights were on. The doors were open. K.O. came to stand beside her. His hand found hers. No words needed. Just presence. Partnership. The wind still howled outside Blackwood Ridge. But Mina Thorne had built something her father never could. Not a fortress, not a dynasty, not an empire. A home. For the lost. For the hunted. For the ones who'd been told they were property and had the courage to say no. She'd opened her door once for 5 begging wolves. Now she opened it for anyone who needed it. And she dared the darkness to try and stop her. The winter would come again. The cold would return. The predators would always be out there. But so would Blackwood. So would Mina. So would the sanctuary she'd built from ashes and blood and unbreakable will. The wolves had begged her to let them in. Now she invited the whole world, and the fire burned brighter than ever before.